Q97 723. Scott Joss, good friend, fiddle player, local resident, fiddle player for Merle for how many years, Scott?
Good morning. Almost, it would have been 15 come this, just a few months from now.
You were on the coast when you heard the news, huh?
The news, yeah. Well, with the news that it was getting close. Yes, I was on the coast.
So it was interesting for us. Like we kind of heard some rumblings in the last couple of weeks, and we thought, that Merle was getting better, that he was taking some time off,
right,
and he was going to be okay, and all of that. So it was, I think, a big surprise yesterday, especially on his birthday when the news came that he had passed, because I think we all were thinking that he was going to be okay. So obviously,
I did too. I was under the same impression, but that's that's what the media does. They don't tell you everything.
Well, it's hard to find out everything because, in spite of his public persona and the fact that we're sharing hundreds of Merle stories over the last couple of days, I spotted him in Holiday Market and Toys R Us and everything. But sometimes Merle could be very, very private too, right?
Sure. I mean, he was always very, very private. You never really got the whole story that I am aware of.
Yeah,
he gave you as much of it as he wanted to give you.
How did you originally hook up with Merle Haggard?
Tiny Moore. I was playing old time fiddle music years and years ago, 1978, 79. Met Tiny Moore. He was of course the mandolin player and fiddle player, but predominantly the mandolin player for Merle. And he would go to those contests, and he would play on the fringes of what we called fiddle camp, where they were learning fiddle tunes note for note so that they could play them like robots and try and win the contest. And Tiny was out improvising in the parking lot with a gentleman named Vern Bogman, who was a tremendous rhythm guitar player. And not many people knew anything about what he was doing or that he was doing it. And I discovered him out there and was enthralled with what he was doing. He was improvising and swinging, as we call it, and making things up at the spur of the moment, and playing tunes like Sweet Georgia Brown and on and on and on. And I began to realize that there was more to the world than just old-time fiddling, which I'm eternally grateful for, the old-time fiddling, but I'm more grateful for the meeting of Tiny Moore. And Tiny allowed me to join his little circle and gave me a chance or two to play along and watch me fall on my face as I tried to improvise, and would laugh uproariously at me as I tried, but he allowed me to keep trying. And obviously saw something and began to talk to Merle about me. And I was 19 at the time, saying, hey, I think there's a kid, he's got some potential. You may want to keep an eye on him. And lo and behold, who would call the house but Mr. Haggard, and said, my friend Tiny Moore recommends you for the gig. If you can be in Bakersfield in the morning, you can get on the bus and go with us. And so that's how it started. And the cap to that particular story is here's this little 19-year-old kid that got on the bus. I was the first one there. Sat on the couch, front lounge, and passing by me once, every once in a while, a guy would pass by me, and I'd go, my God, that's Roy Nichols. My God, that's Dennis Romek. Oh my God, that's. And nobody spoke to me because here's a strange little kid sitting there on the couch that they didn't know was going to be there, and just on their way back to their bus doing their thing, which I hadn't even been to the back of the bus yet. And so I'm watching all my musical heroes go by on the band bus, and Tiny was the last one, and he came on, and he finally said, well, hi, Scott, glad you could make it, and was very kind to me. as kind as he could be. And the bus began to roll, and it rolled, and it rolled, and it rolled. And I was sitting there on the couch throughout the night and into the next morning, and throughout the next day and into the next night. And finally, I asked Tiny as he walked by, where do we ever stop, or where are we going? What's happening here? And he said, oh, nobody's told you anything? I said, no. He said, we're on our way to New York City.
Whoa!
And I said, oh. And he said, yeah, we're going to play Carnegie Hall.
Oh, my gosh.
So that was the first Merle Haggard show that I ever did, was in 1981, New York City, Carnegie Hall. It was a package show. Dolly Parton was there. That's all I can remember of the artists that were there, but you can imagine why. But I don't remember much of that show. Merle did not throw me a solo for that show. That didn't come till later, at a more relaxed show, at which point Tiny was telling me, never take your eyes off him. He's liable to turn around and point at you when you least expect it, and you best be ready to play something. So, of course, my eyes were glued on him continuously from the moment I got on the bus until, the end of the tour, basically, but especially during the shows. And I remember turning to talk to Tiny. We were playing at Dinner House, and the stage was up, elevated over the people. They were eating, and we were kind of up over their heads. And I remember staring at Merle. Nothing. He wasn't throwing me anything. And I turned to say something to Tiny, and Tiny was looking past me and had this look on his face like, uh-huh. And I turned around, and Merle was staring at me and pointing at me, and he wanted me to play. Well, I jumped up out of that seat, lost control of my bow. It fell over the edge of the stage and landed on this couple's table. and they were gracious enough to hand it back to me, and I thought, well, that's it, I'm done.
Yeah.
And I look over, and Merle just doubled over laughing. He couldn't hardly contain himself. It was so funny for him, not for me, obviously, but everybody was laughing and having a great time at my expense.
We're talking to Scott. Scott, let me just identify here. What a great storyteller you've always been. 731 Q97, and Scott, of course, played fiddle for Merle in the Strangers for many years. And the last gig was about 15 years playing in the Strangers.
Yes, sir. I was coming right up on it.
Yeah. So, good stories, and I understand you've been up a while doing some interviews. I want to get back to what we talked about off the air, and we had read that Merle had purchased a brand new bus and said, my family doesn't want me to go back and tour, but once I kick this thing, I'm going to. And you said he'd actually had 2 new tour buses for the Strangers, huh?
Well, his was brand new, the newest you could possibly get, and ours was a major improvement. Ours was somewhat older. It was the Oak Ridge Boys' old bus, but compared to the bus we had, it was like traveling in the Taj Mahal. The air conditioning worked, everything worked. The old MCI we rode that thing into the ground and sweated our way across Texas many times with no air conditioning.
Well, that sounds like a pretty glamorous life, Scott, touring with the band.
It is, if you don't mind sweating your way across Texas.
So in your mind and in everybody's, you guys were going to hit the road again as soon as he got better, right?
Yeah, I was given the same information that you had. It was done. They were working on it. They were clearing it up, and he was canceling, those last 4 or 5 tours to rest, to recuperate, to get back on his feet. And of course, we were all praying for him and happy to allow him the opportunity to do that, and to get better. So we were all very shocked. And I can only speak for myself, but I'm sure that everybody in the organization was very, very shocked when we got the news that it was not going to continue. And none of us knew anything, and I still don't know the story. I don't know what was wrong. I don't know any of that, and that's okay. I don't need to know that. I do know that it was something other than the double pneumonia, because they said they had that under control. So that's all I have to go on.
Scott, when was the last time you spoke to Merle?
The last time I spoke to him was the day before his birthday, which would have been the 5th. Janessa was sweet enough to call me. I live over at the coast at this point, over towards the Trinidad area. And she called, and she obviously was upset and said, if you want to see Dad, you'd best do your best to get to town. And I was very shocked, very surprised, and looked at my wife, Judy, and said, I don't understand. She said, well, let's just do it. She said, let's get in the car, let's go, let's find out what's happening. So we went and ran into the situation that he was on his bus. He'd been staying on the bus for a long period. I think that's where he felt most comfortable. I mean, when you spend most of your life on a bus, I think that's where you're going to feel the most comfortable. And it was obviously obvious that he was not well, and there were they were taking care of him and doing the best they could for him. And I was allowed to go on the bus for a moment. Janessa was very kind in letting me go on, and I looked at him, and he was not present at the moment, and I put my hand on his arm, and I thanked him, told him that I loved him, thanked him for all the musical experience, the knowledge that he imparted to me, the artist that I'm aware of because of his being, and again, just thanked him for the many years of employment and the friendship. And he opened his eyes, looked at me, and said, I heard you, and closed his eyes, and that was the last words that I had with Merle. And then by the next morning, I hear that he'd passed away. So that was it. It was April 5th, later in the afternoon, and that's all I got to say, and that's all he got to say to me. So, very powerful moment for me, and I can't stress enough how much I love the guy. I love his music. You just played That's the Way Love Goes, and appropriately, that is one of my very favorite performances of his. Vocally, I don't see how you could do much better. He did win a Grammy for that, but just that particular performance is one of his finest, as far as I'm concerned, as far as the feeling, the emotion, the phrasing, the voice itself, the fact that it was Lefty's signature song. Third or fourth time it became number one, but just when I think of Merle Haggard, I think of That's the Way Love Goes. If I need to listen to a Merle Haggard tune, I listen to That's the Way Love Goes. It means a lot to me, so thanks for playing that.
Scott, thanks for being on the show this morning. It means so much. I'm so glad that we touch bases with one another, and I'm sure our listeners are feeling very blessed at this moment to hear your memories, and our thoughts go out to you, and I know your thoughts go out to everybody else, and love all around, love, blessings, and peace. Huh, Scott?
Well, thank you. Thank you for also, very quickly, thank you for always being so accommodating to me when I needed you to advertise something I was doing, you were always there to do it. So it's my pleasure to speak to you about this situation. So I hope you all have a wonderful day, and thanks for letting me be part of it.
Oh, thank you, Scott. Thank you so much. Real pleasure here.
All right, you guys. I'll talk to you in a while.
Thank you so much.
Scott.
Bye.
Okay, bye.
Scott Joss from Strangers, Merle's fiddle player, and Merle gave him a chance when he was 19 years old, and good to have him on the show. 738, 97.3, Q97.